connected to the relationship between the NATO and Russia. And of course, Russia cannot accept. Russia must be prepared for a whole war, economic, political, and of course on military field. I think they are not able. I was surprised that the Russian army is so weak.
Pourriez-vous vous présenter?
Bonjour, je suis professeur József Kis-Benedek. I am a former intelligence officer. I work in the military intelligence office, not so long, 40 years, 45 years. And after going into pension, I began to work in different universities, but mainly in the military university of Budapest. But actually, I teach on 3 other universities. And it means my favorite interest is security policy, terrorism, Middle East. This is my favorite place because I worked in the diplomacy, in the military diplomacy. I was working in Belgium, I was working in Romania and in Israel. That's why I'm close with the terrorism. And of course, I deal with the crisis areas, which is unfortunately actually is very important for everybody. And I very often go to TV, to radio, give interviews, and deal with students, of course.
Le 24 février 2022, Vladimir Poutine annonce le début d'une opération spéciale pour protéger les populations russophones. Il interdit notamment l'usage du mot de guerre. Qu'en pensez-vous?
I think it was an operation special, but only at the beginning. So actually we can say that this is a real war. It's far away from a special small operation. I think that the Russians were not well prepared for a war, even for a special operation. It's a mistake of the Russian intelligence, I think, and the Russian armed forces are not prepared for this so-called special operation. There are many questions. What kind of operation is this? What kind of war is this? Is this a proxy war? Can we say that this is a proxy war? I think yes, because the confrontation is not only between Russia and Ukraine, but the confrontation is between the West, between the United States of America and Russia. So the conflict began not 24 of February last year. It started earlier. So if we see the relationship between the West and Russia, we can see that the bad connection between the United States and Russia began much more earlier. It connected to the relationship between the NATO and Russia. And of course, Russia cannot accept the join of the NATO, Ukraine, or any former country from the Soviet Union. So this is a taboo for the Russian, and of course they cannot accept the enlargement of the NATO. So they will go back to the Cold War area, and maybe they have an intention for ruling the eastern countries of Europe as well. I think that this is a war which cannot be seen the end of the war, because Russia has intention, as I mentioned, to the security of Russia, to avoid the join of other country to the NATO. And the American has the intention to weaken the Soviet Union, Russia. First of all, the Soviet Union, the Cold War, actually Russia. And as we see, the Russian armed forces were not prepared for the defense, for the attack, and for the defense of the country. They are not prepared, but for the attacking the Ukraine, they were not well prepared. So it was a surprise. As everybody remembers that at the beginning, the Russians told that it will be no war. They don't want to occupy Ukraine. And later, as we can see, they are attacking all the territory of Ukraine. So that's why I think this is a asymmetric war, because if we speak about the asymmetric war, there is a huge asymmetry between Russia and the NATO. There is a huge asymmetry between United States and Russia, and of course between Russia and Ukraine. So this is absolutely an asymmetric warfare. Of course, if we see the participation of Western countries in this conflict, I cannot imagine that Russia can win this war. I cannot imagine that the other part can win this war. So at the end, both of them are saying that we won the war, but the question is, when can it happen? So I think that those participation of different countries in helping Ukraine, giving armaments to Ukraine, can contribute to the continuation of the war.
Quel est votre point de vue sur la guerre qui se déroule depuis plus d'1 an en Ukraine? Diriez-vous qu'il s'agit d'une guerre de civilisation anti-occidentale ou plutôt d'une guerre traditionnelle de conquête territoriale?
I don't think so that the Russians will conquer territory. They don't think, they don't express this way of idea. I think they have a pure aim to make and to change the situation, the political situation in Ukraine. So it means that Ukraine cannot be an enemy of Russia. They cannot be, Ukraine, close contact with the NATO country, and of course, Ukraine cannot never be member of the NATO. So territorial aims of Russia we cannot see actually, and I don't think so that the Russian armed forces are able to conquer the territory of Ukraine. And we cannot forget that Ukraine, as a relative young country, will defend himself in a war against Russia. So this is the patriotic war of Ukraine and the changing of political system of Ukraine. And they don't want to belong to Russia in the future. So that's why the situation is very complex and complicated.
L'Union européenne a adopté des sanctions économiques contre la Russie, accueilli des millions d'Ukrainiens, décidé de fournir des armes à l'Ukraine et de lui offrir des perspectives européennes. Que pensez-vous de cette réaction?
So, what is the intention of the European countries? I mean, the Western European countries. I think that the decision, the firm decision, is to defend and to help the Ukraine in this let's speak patriotic war. And of course, there is a zone of tampon between Russia and the West, and this is the whole Ukraine or a part of Ukraine. Actually, we cannot say that the whole Ukraine will remain as actually. Maybe can be divided. One part belonging to Ukraine, to Russia. Let's see the eastern part of Ukraine, Donbas, Luhansk, and the two other southern region. But this is as well a question mark, because the Ukrainian side do not want to accept this idea. They want to keep the whole region. And we cannot forget the Crimea. The Crimea was occupied by Russia. So in this case, the Ukrainian has a firm decision to take back this part of former Ukraine. I don't think so that they can do it. So I think that the decision and the resolution is in the middle. So eastern part of Ukraine, so the Donbas, Luhansk, can go to Russia. The Crimea, no, and the two other region of the southern part of Ukraine will belong to Ukraine. If the negotiation can be end with a result of a discussion.
Dans ce cas de figure, une paix est-elle envisageable?
Peace will never be. No, I don't think so that it will be peace. It will be a ceasefire. It will be some agreement. How it's too early to say, but a huge love between Russia and Ukraine, I cannot imagine. Think how many people were killed, how many towns, how many cities were destroyed, totally destroyed. So this cannot be forgotten in a short time. Let's think back to the Second World War or the First World War. It takes many years. And I cannot imagine that after a so-called peace agreement, it will be a real peace. It can be a continuous fight against Russia or against Ukraine. It depends from which side do you follow the events. But I think that in a short time, we cannot accept a peace between Ukraine and Russia.
La position de la Hongrie vis-à-vis de la guerre en Ukraine est qualifiée d'ambiguë par de nombreux dirigeants européens. Quelle est votre analyse sur le sujet?
If we speak about the Hungarian position, is unfortunate. I'm not happy and I'm not proud of the intention of the government, because the government is against the NATO and the European Union ideas. All the NATO countries, actually there are 31 countries in the NATO, all are helping Ukraine, Hungary not. They are speaking about the so-called peace, but what does it mean peace? Accept the actual situation. Is this a peace? This is not a peace. So if the politician, the Hungarian, actually Hungarian politicians are speaking about the peace, they don't know what they can imagine under the expression peace. So if it is a Russian peace, it's okay. But in this case, everything will belong to Russia, and the Russian will say what will be the future in this part of the world. So the policy of Hungary is rather special. And if we see the eastern part of Europe, I mean from Finland to Bulgaria, the majority of countries are helping Ukraine. Not all countries, but the NATO countries, EU countries, yes. The non-aligned countries, not everybody is helping, but it's a rather special case. I don't speak about the neutral states from Austria or from Switzerland. This is a special case. But you see that even a neutral country, Finland, joined the NATO. Sweden, neutral country, joined the NATO, or will join the NATO. Unfortunately, and I'm against not proud, we are against joining Sweden to the NATO, but not from security policy. So this is a stupid idea. This is my opinion, like a Hungarian guy.
Comment expliquez-vous les revers subis par l'armée russe à Kherson, Kiev, etc., alors qu'elle est considérée comme l'une des plus puissantes au monde?
I think that those towns are hard to occupy. Kherson, and part of Kherson is occupied by Russia, but I don't think so that this will be forever. The military situation around Kherson is very difficult for Russia and for Ukraine as well, because of the Dnieper River. You cannot go from Ukrainian side on the other side of the river, where the Russians are in a defense position. But I think that this is not yet finished. So it will be in May or in June, another, I think, huge attack of the Ukrainian armed forces. They are preparing themselves. Actually, they are getting more and more equipment, military equipment from the West. So I think this is not yet finished. Kherson. But if we are speaking about Kherson, we cannot forget the Zaporozhets, the nuclear power station, which is a huge danger, not only for Ukraine, but for Russia as well. Normally, if we go back in the history, not a normal behavior to make military action around a nuclear power station. So I think this is as well as stupidity. If we go another part of the northern part, and we are speaking about Kiev, Russian forces cannot occupy Kiev. Kiev was before the war 3 million people, inhabitants, and I don't think so that the Russian, with these forces, actually prepared for the war, are able to occupy the capital. However, at the beginning of the war, the special operation, the Russian idea was to occupy the capital, and they thought, I think this was a huge mistake, that in this case the Ukrainian was give up the defense, and they would accept the attack of the Russian armed forces. Not succeeded. Let me remind you that many Russian troops were inside Ukraine, and they wanted to go to Kiev. Not succeeded. So the capital cannot be can be forgotten for Russia. Of course, they are attacking the critical infrastructure. Many of them are destroyed, and many of Ukrainian towns are in ruins. If you go to the southern part of Ukraine, I mean the western part of Ukraine, Odessa, I think, Odessa is important for Ukraine, of course. The whole area connected to the sea is important for Ukraine, and I think that Odessa is hard to be occupied. I don't know the Russian aims, but this is my feeling that the Russian will say enough. So after this four region, 2 in east, 2 in south, with the actual Russian forces can be occupied, but they cannot go further. Or it is necessary to change the whole situation. It means that the Russian must be prepared for a whole war. Economic, political, and of course on military field. I think they are not able. As a former soldier, and I knew the Russian army and the Soviet army, I was surprised that the Russian army is so weak. They are not prepared. They don't have modern equipment. They use the old tanks. So it means that with those military equipment, Russia cannot go ahead in the territory of Ukraine. However, the Ukrainian forces are helped by the Western country with modern equipment. It means that for Russia, there is one solution: to make some kind of agreement. What kind of agreement is another question. Some kind of agreement. Because the capacity, the economic capacity of Russia is very weak. Very weak.
Il y a beaucoup de polémiques concernant la société militaire privée Wagner. Quelle est votre analyse sur ce point?
I mentioned that the Russian army is not ready for a real war, real fight. They are using private companies, and the private companies, of course, they belong to the state, so private company, but not the regular armed forces are they? But they are using even guys coming out from prison. So it means that they want to keep the real Russian population away from the confrontation. That's why they are using private companies, they are using prisoners, and this is not the real armed forces. And do not forget that many young Russian people, of course, home, left the country. So it means that the Russian population, the Russian soldiers, are not happy to go into war against a former so-called fraternal countries. So it means that they don't understand why do we have to go to Ukraine for dying, for occupy the territory. If we see the situation on the other side, I mean in Ukraine, they are fighting for freedom. They are fighting for the country, the patriotic war, and they are ready to fight. And at the same time, this is not the case on the Russian side. So this is a moral way of thinking of the Russian soldier. And we can see very clearly that the military equipment of Russia are old enough. They are speaking about new armaments. We cannot see. Where is the Armata tank, for example? There are 2 or 3 what they could use, but normally they cannot use. The Air Force was very weak. Russian Air Force was very, very weak. They could not attack the Ukrainian installations. Only a pair of airplane attacked some places, and they went back to Russia. But we could not see that the Russian Air Force was deeply involved in the war. In a war like this, of course, the Air Force has its task. We cannot see. Air defense of Ukraine was and is rather strong because they got new equipment, and the Russian cannot attack them. Missiles, you can forget the missiles. They used at the beginning of the war, and actually the artillery. From where is the artillery using artillery? From the Second World War. The Russian way of thinking is to attack with heavy artillery fire the enemy, territory of the enemy, and to destroy everything. This is not in the modern warfare. They could not realize, and they were not prepared to use UAVs, for example. Of course, they got some military equipment from abroad, mainly from Iran. But this is not enough to follow the war and to have success in the war. So the military equipment, in generally, I would say that on the Russian side are rather weak. And this can help as well to finish the war.
Pensez-vous que ce conflit pourrait s'étendre à l'Europe et même conduire à une confrontation avec l'OTAN?
Confrontation avec the OTAN, I cannot imagine. The NATO is not ready to make to enter a confrontation with Russia. If there is a confrontation of NATO with Russia, it will be a war in Europe, or not only in Europe, because the Americans are members of the NATO, and the NATO without American forces is, you know, what does it mean? Almost nothing. So I cannot imagine the participation of NATO, and there is no intention. If you follow the statement of the Secretary General of NATO, Stoltenberg, he told many times that the NATO has no intention to participate as a whole, as an organization. Of course, the NATO is encouraging the individual countries to send armaments to Ukraine, but this doesn't mean that the NATO will participate in this war. and I don't think so that it will happen. I can imagine, but in this case, I think that it will be a war in Europe, not on world level, but in Europe, yes. The Russians are as well not interested to go in fight with the NATO countries, because they know very clearly that they are not able even to occupy or to destroy Ukraine. What can they do with Poland and with the other countries? Germany, France, we can forget. We can forget. So if we are speaking about asymmetric warfare, the asymmetry is in the relationship of Russia and the NATO, and on the side of the NATO. Let's see the GDP of only American, and let's see the GDP of Russia. It's huge difference. So they are not able to follow a war. Of course, they are speaking about nuclear facilities, nuclear armaments, but I think that this is only in the political discussions, because the Russians know very well that if they use nuclear weapon, it will be a war, and it will be used by the NATO countries, by the American nuclear war against Russia. What does it mean? It's a total war. No reason why to use those. So I think that this is a very dangerous development. If we go back in the history after the Second World War and after the Cold War, we used to speak not too much concerning the nuclear weapon. Actually, they are speaking both sides. And the Russian will make a depot in the territory of Belarus. So it means that in this case, I would be not surprised when Poland would say that we want to have in the territory of Poland nuclear weapon, American nuclear weapon. This is not a positive development. But as we know, the Russians have a nuclear weapon very close to the Western countries. And if end of July they will have some nuclear weapon in Belarus, it means that it will be a new danger for the Western countries. They will give an answer. I'm 100% sure.
Et enfin, comment pensez-vous que cette guerre pourrait prendre fin? Comment les pourparlers de paix pourraient-ils être relancés?
Who is speaking about finishing the war? The Russians are not ready to finish the war. They do not finish the war. They don't till now they have not aimed the cause of the war. So I think that Russia is not ready to finish this war, and Ukraine has an intention to continue the war till they get armaments from the West, modern armament. So I think the first important question is to have a concrete aim of the war, not finished. Where to finish? The Ukrainians think that they are going ahead in the direction of Crimea, but this is, in my mind, this is an exaggeration. So they could find a solution between a peace and war. So stop here, make an agreement, ceasefire first of all, agreement, and the agreement, the peace agreement must be checked. Question is by whom? I don't think so that the NATO can do it, because the Russians will not accept. Only one international organization can do this, and this is the United Nations. Because Russia cannot be neglected. Russia must be part of the solution. If not, Russia will not accept. And in the UN, they will say veto, not accepted. After, which countries can participate? This is mainly a theoretical way of thinking. I cannot imagine that the United Nations can ask the NATO or the European Union to oversee the peace agreement. I think the UN should do this, and with so-called neutral countries. So those who have not participated in this war. It means India, China, and there are many African countries who participate in different parts of the world in the peacekeeping mission. Maybe, I think this can be accepted by Russia as well. But unfortunately, we are not yet here.
Je vous remercie, Monsieur József Kis-Benedek, pour cette interview.
You are welcome.